Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to talk to you for a few minutes on when the narcissists lose their grade A or primary source of supply. I just wanted to, hit this in a different way, maybe to get some people to understand it a little bit easier. When you're the grade A or primary source supply, you're the one that they're primarily with on a daily basis. Now, they do have secondary, tertiary, they do have that harem garage where they're friends with all their exes and they're triangulating you and they're cheating on you. But generally speaking, they chose you to be their primary supply, or you guys came together. It's not a good thing, but the reason is because you were able to supply a good amount of their fuel, of their narcissistic supply, maybe 80% of it, to where generally speaking, most people could only generate, maybe 10, 20%, I don't know. But a lot of people don't have resilience with the narcissist. They don't take that pain, they don't take that abuse. But we have dealt with it in the past, so it kind of is something that we're all too used to until we wake up and decide to go the other way. But generally speaking, when they lose the grade A or primary source supply because either you had enough or they got pompous and discarded you and thought that, all of a sudden that wherever they started from the bottom and then they got with you and they came up a little and they're doing pretty good now. So now they feel like they can just discard you because of that pride before the fall thing. And so they discard you or you discard yourself because of the abuse. And the reason the narcissist does not feel love. So when you don't feel love, you kind of end up apparently you either have the ability to feel love and be generated on that side, or we could feel a little bit of both, but they have given up on love. So everything that their whole construct has to deal with pain, sorrow, depression, revenge, and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, when they lose the grade A source supply, you are the one that regulates their emotions. You are the one that acknowledges them, you admire them, adorn them, and fawn them, and you keep their life in order and you keep them safe to the point where they feel comfortable and project onto you all of their negative activity, and it regulates their emotional stability, and it also gives them a better idea. It gives them better self-perception of themselves. It makes them actually feel a little bit more like that God that they always talk about, that they believe they are inside. They believe more that things are quite a bit better when they are with the primary source supply. When they don't have the primary source supply, and if they can't replace the primary source supply with somebody that can fuel them at that level, then a lot of terrible things can happen for them. Basically, what they do is they go into a withdrawal because they can't be sufficed. We're creatures of habit, so we get used to things. We get used to what we do on a daily basis. They're probably used to projecting onto you on a daily basis and flipping that energy and degrading you, getting all their negative energy out on you. And they have the stability through you, the fuel through you, the love and adoration. So you're kind of like a gauge for them. Like you have gauges in the car, the pressures, right? When you're an in-house empath for them, or you're secondary, tertiary, they all make up a certain amount of fuel and certain types of fuel. But the people that are secondary, tertiary just can't be the in-house type. They could be married for all we know. So they can't be the primary source, or they're not going to put up with it, or they would not admire them, adore them, and people please them like you did. And so it would never work. Or another narcissist would be they're both seeking for all the adoration. They're egotistical. So two narcissists would destroy each other. In some small cases, you can get a borderline with a narcissist, but it's very volatile. So when they lose their primary source supply, they don't have that. Their self-perception gauge and their emotional stability gauge is not very, it's low. They don't feel confident. So they're basically narcissistic injury is what they're walking around with. And they have to pin all that negative fuel on somebody. So they kind of do a lot of outrages. It could be in public, in different places. And that's why I always say that you're the center of the fuel matrix for the narcissist. You're very important to them, although they wreck everything, including stuff that's important to them, right? But you do so much for them because, a lot of times there's different reasons. You see them for who they are, really, truly, at some point in time, and you still stick with them. Whether it is because you don't feel like they could handle themselves on their own, but that's just part of the game, really. Or the fact that, you're trauma bonded, or you care about them, or if you love them enough that it will get them to change. Which all of them are all lies. They end up having a lot of things. Sometimes they'll go into seclusion, isolation, and just pure collapse because they'll be depressed or raging, and then they will get into certain things like gambling or drugs, alcohol, anything like really on another level, spending sprees, anything to regulate their emotions. So they have nobody. Basically, you're an emotional distraction as well. They need to be distracted every moment of the day, or else they're going to have to look at themselves. That's just how life works. They have absolutely no regulation of their emotional field. And they believe also in this fantasy person that they are through their egotistical self, that you could never, people can't supply that amount of fuel forever, and it's insatiable at some point, and it's also a lie. So it's hard for anything good to come of that. But they're basically an addict for supply. And that's why sometimes they'll rage out on people at work or outside the house if they don't have a primary source supply and they can't get that fuel they need, that so that they can have, belittle somebody so it puffs them up and makes them feel good. And this is what they need. They need this all the time to regulate their self-worth. Remember? They regulate their self-worth when they stalk you based on the way that you are at that moment in time. Because if they have discarded you and you're feeling horrible, then they feel like that they're living a better life than you, and they caused that, and they have power and control over you. So then they feel good about that because it's awesome to them. They like that. It gives them adrenaline. But they get it very impulsive is the word, making bad decisions. And they can get into like a lot of sex partners, a lot of drugs and alcohol, or spending sprees, gambling, all of that in the midst of this. But they're basically a drug addict of supply fuel. And so it's kind of like a heroin addict. When they don't have the heroin, they're in detox mode. They hate detox mode, but it's actually good for them because they have a chance to recover. And that's why they say when you enable a narcissist, it doesn't ever help them because they need to get into detox mode so that they can make changes in their life. But when you enable them, you're fueling them. It just makes them know their life is fine that way. They enjoy life that way. That's what they prefer. So they're not going to make any changes. The only way that a narcissist would make changes is if, what do they say about alcoholics, is when they hit rock bottom, which would be no supply for a long period of time. Like nobody would supply them. And if nobody supplied the narcissist, narcissists would have to act right. I mean, they would have to work on themselves, or to some degree, they would have to act more of a logically same level. But the thing is also is these guys don't want to change, so they may seem vulnerable. But that's what it does. It gets them to be vulnerable, very vulnerable and depressed. And then people start to see them out there not as who they presented when they were with you. They can't hold up that image. The mask is falling down now, you see, because the fuel, your fuel is what regulates them. It's almost like they're always checking in to see, like, how's that gauge? And if you give them all this love and support, then they can go out there knowing that they're looking good. They're feeling good, because they don't have anything in here. So they don't have an internal processor. You're an external processor for all their emotions and their perception of self. So if you give them bad news, that's why they have to leave you when you're, say, a primary source that's been beat down to the ground, and you start giving it back to them. Bucking back, I call it. When you buck back at the narcissist, or you kind of start mirroring back to them who they truly are, they have to leave because they can't regulate like that. That just gives them negative regulation. It'll give them narcissist injury, and then they won't be able to gauge that they're doing well, you see. So the narcissist is most successful when they have a primary source supply, and then they can, go out there and do more to get other forms of supply and use your fuel to do it. It makes them feel powerful, and basically they steal it from you, and they believe at some point in time in the future that you had nothing to do with it. You did nothing for them. But, when a drug addict gets drugs again, if they truly did not want to change, then they're just gonna drug up. And that's what the narcissist does. When they have no supply, because they don't want to change, they go into narcissistic crash. But then when they come out of that and they rebuild somehow through secondary, tertiary source supply, through people that lift them up, and usually sometimes they may change their whole persona at that point in time. They may act somewhat right for a moment in time, but then as that steam builds up, that pressure builds up, that pompous pride and ego builds up, the mask comes right back on, and it's like round two. But it's a little bit more powerful because they know as they do this year after year after year, it helps them to be increasingly more manipulative. And whenever you've been in a situation that put you in dire straits, a lot of times, generally speaking, we would always try to, in the future, avoid them at all costs. So what are you going to do? You're going to build up so many fail safes and backups, and you're not going to be afraid to gaslight harder than you did before. And this is where everything's out the window. That's why they're not only emotionally unequipped, but no persona, no inside person, but they also have no love and no morals and no ethics. So unless they make a change, it's horrible for everybody around them, but most importantly, it's horrible for the primary source supply. So if you can give me a like, a thumbs up, and a subscription, I appreciate it. Love you all. Peace. We out.